Let me start by thanking Bradson and Jonathan and Suellen for the opportunity to be here to talk about a very pressing topic, the future of money. Now, a seminar about the future of money suggests that money is about to change. Otherwise, there would be no reason to talk about its future. And yet, what exactly are we talking about here? What kind of change? We have just heard a fascinating discussion about how new technologies relate to monetary theory, whether the quantitative theory of money is to be replaced by the fiscal theory of the price level and so on. And one of the things that discussion shows is that there are, of course, many ways to think about the future of money. And I want to suggest here that there are other, of course, ways to talk about it. First of all, if we want to discuss the future of money, there's the question about the future of a specific national money. So, for example, the future of the real. And here, the question mostly has to do with whether the relative value of the currency will go up and down. So will, for example, the real go up or down vis-a-vis the dollar or the yen or the euro and so on and so forth. And we all know that the answer here obviously depends on many things, you know, the export level, the growth, politics, the pandemic. In the case of Brazil, for sure, the price of commodities, which Brazilians should be happy it's going up, and other things such as the international credit cycle and so on and so forth. The relative value of a currency, there are no reliable models about it, and probably will continue not knowing exactly how to model the relative value of currency vis-a-vis other currencies, of course. Then if we want to think about the future of money, there are, of course, questions about international monetary affairs. Perhaps, in fact, two main questions. First, there's the role of the dollar, which is the international reserve currency. You may or may not know, but international contracts are mostly priced in dollars. So countries and companies issue debt in dollars all the time. For example, when a South American company, a Brazilian company, or an Argentinian or a Colombian and so on and so forth, sells anything to a buyer abroad, whether it's in the US or in Asia or in Africa or anywhere in the world, they price the transaction in dollars. And so the central bank everywhere in the world, mostly, including, of course, the Brazilian central bank, needs to accumulate dollars. Since international trade is in dollars and international finance is in dollars. And this is why the US becomes the reserve currency, just because everybody needs to accumulate it. Everybody wants to save in dollars. Now, I can't get into the details because I don't have time, but it's a funny situation for everybody. It's a strange equilibrium. The American government will issue a lot of debt because central banks worldwide want to accumulate treasury bills. And to do that, these countries will have to export a lot to the United States. And so the US will have to have a trade deficit. And because of that, the United States might even deindustrialize in part, which it has already done. And that generates all sorts of political tensions that are well known. There's an old economist, deceased now, called Robert Triffin, who explained that having the international reserve currency is a kind of a mixed blessing. So the role of the dollar is still the main question in international monetary affairs, I believe. But there are others, and another one, which is normally of greater interest for lawyers, is the international monetary architecture. And so there's the workings of the IMF and the relationship between central banks and how they move liquidity to one another. And so the future of money has to do with the future of this local currencies, but also within a broader architecture that is in part legalized. And so you have international monetary law, which is not what it used to be since the 70s, but that's, you know, that's a detail, but it's part of a discussion of the future of money. And guys, let's not forget that when we are talking about the future of local currencies, we should never take for granted that currencies, national currencies, will survive. For example, you go to Ecuador, and the sucre, which is the Ecuadorian currency, is dead. It's been deceased, buried for 20 years. The government in Ecuador, I don't know if you know that, it pays salaries in dollars. People pay one another in dollars. So in Ecuador, monetary policy is dead. And will it happen elsewhere? Perhaps, not impossible. And so this is a part of the discussion of the future of money, right? The struggle of each country to maintain not so much its currency for the sake of, you know, for the honor of having a currency, but for the sake of, for the possibility to be able to do monetary policy. Now, a separate discussion is the discussion about the form of money, the format of money. Money is a thing that has a certain form, a certain mechanics in each place, in each historical setting. It's different, right? Money solves what's called the problem of double coincidence of wants, which is easy to understand. You have a horse, and I want to buy your horse, but I produce ice cream. I want your horse, but you don't want my ice cream. So we can't barter. So how do I pay you? We need a common denominator, and that's money. And so people have used a bunch of things over the years as money. They have used salt. That's why we speak of salary. They have used shells, cocoa, and of course, gold and silver and many other things. But for the past 500 years or so, at least in Europe, and then in the Americans, and now in the Americas and later everywhere, money has dematerialized. Money is not material. It's a thing, but it's not something that you hold like gold or silver or cocoa or salt. It is dematerialized. It's just a right. And therefore, that's where law becomes particularly relevant, since law provides the structure for dematerialized money. It started out in the Middle Ages as bills of exchange by tradesmen that operated as money. And then later it became banknotes, and then demand deposits with banks that at first were redeemable in gold. So you can go to the bank and, you know, you return the banknote and the bank gives you gold for that, but not anymore, not anywhere, in fact. And I'm, of course, going very quickly since we don't have time. But anyway, that's how banks started to issue money. The system was inaugurated in the 17th century. Europe, a landmark was the year of 1694 with the creation of the Bank of England. That's, in the books, that's a reference that always pops up all the time. And then that's where we started to have money as the thing that we know today, right? The dematerialized thing that we know today. And so money is this strange thing. It's a kind of a partnership between commercial banks and governments. The money is not issued by the government. People forget that very often. Students sometimes are surprised if I tell them, most of the money is not created by the government. Not in Brazil, not in the United States, basically nowhere. So who creates the money? Money is created by the banks. What is money? It's demand deposits. It's the money that we have in the bank account. And that's more than 90% of the money worldwide. The government just issues like 10% or so, which is the physical notes and what has almost become meaningless, the metallic coins that we sometimes carry in our wallets. But more importantly, the banks are not simply creating the money as they want, because the central banks have instruments to control the quantity of the money that is created privately by the banks, which is why money is this public-private partnership, right? It's the banks creating most of the money, but the government creating, or not creating, but controlling the amount of money out there. And if we continue this history of the form of money, then you will come across another milestone, which is digitalization of money. It's not only that money is dematerialized, but rather the money has become digital. And so when money became digital, somewhere in the 80s, let's say, or 90s, maybe a little earlier, I don't know exactly. These things are progressive, right? But a few decades ago, when computers became popular and money became digital, at first it seemed like nothing was changing. It's just a different means to do precisely the same thing. Account balances now are digital account balances, but it just seems like the same thing. It's a little more convenient. It's all in the internet. But then it started to change. And that's where we're now. We're in the middle of an avalanche. In the middle of an avalanche in the change in the form of money. There are new types of monetary and quasi-monetary instruments being created all the time. First, there is what's called electronic money or e-money. Bank deposits, the money that we have in the bank account, they are in some sense e-money, electronic money, because they're not the real deal. They're not fiat money. They are not the money created by the central bank. It's money created by the commercial bank. So it's electronic money. And in most countries, they are not legal tender, what we call curso legal, right? Curso legal is the term in Portuguese. But they're close enough and they operate as money in practice. Now, there are, for the past 10 years or so, there have been competing types of e-money. So in China, there is Alipay and WeChat Nobody uses money anymore in China. Everything is paid through these mechanisms that operate based on electronic money. There is the very famous case in Kenya and a little less famous, but also prevalent in India of M-Pesa, and so on. And alongside e-money and electronic money, there is now another interesting technology that is changing the format of money, which is the blockchain. And in fact, you know, there's the first blockchain ever created, which is precisely the Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin is nothing but the first blockchain ever created. And so what's so interesting about the Bitcoin? Well, there is something actually astonishing about the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin, what's special about the Bitcoin is not simply the technology, the blockchain, right? The technology for creating blockchain existed before the coming about of Bitcoins. What is special about Bitcoin is that there's this technology that permits two things that beforehand we didn't have. Now we can have digital money without an intermediary. You see, digital money is easily created. But then there's this problem, what the textbooks call the problem of double spending. How do you guarantee that the same monetary unit will not be spent twice? Today, the way we do that is by making an intermediary liable to control and manage the currency. Thus, we have banks. So, you know, I have 100 reais in my account, say at Itaú, right? And I pay 10 reais to Brazzo, okay? Meaning that I should now have 90. If I have less than 90, I'm going to sue the bank. So the bank better develop very good mechanisms to control the use of this digital units, right? But with Bitcoin, what you can have is a digital unit of account, which is the Bitcoin, right? That can operate as money without the intermediary, because in the blockchain, what you have is this decentralized web of computers. And so if I want to pay Bradson, simply it's going to be a direct transfer inside the blockchain that the computer scientists tell us is perfectly safe, because it has to be validated by all of the other members of this blockchain. And so it can't be hacked. Now, some governments are creating their own cryptos. There is the small story and the big story. The small story is the city coins. It's programmable quasi-money, right? Issued by cities. Many cities have them. Vienna has it, Seoul has it, Tel Aviv has it, and Niterói in Rio de Janeiro is going to create its city coin. But that's, you know, that's just a detail. When it comes to state-sponsored initiatives with money, the big story is, of course, the central bank digital currencies. Because if people migrate to private currencies, whether it's Bitcoins or another cryptocurrencies, then the governments might lose the thing that they cherish the most when it comes to money, which is their ability to do monetary policy. So governments are considering creating their own digital money that will be legal tender. Okay, so it's the real deal. It's fiat money, like the money we carry in our wallets, except it's digital. And we can talk more about that in Q&A. Now, I think there are three main questions when it comes to the governance of of, this pathways that are coming up when we talk about the future of money. And I think my time is up, isn't it? Is it not, Suellen?
You have 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes, so let me say in 3 minutes, if I can, right? What are the key questions for that I, at least as far as I can tell, are governance choices? And this is really where law plays in, since law provides the structure and really crystallizes the political choices made by society. Law regulates what is possible to accomplish technologically. Just because something is technologically possible doesn't mean it's going to happen. I see the following major questions. The first one is the problem of public versus private money. I mentioned the coming about of central bank digital currencies. It's so far a reality only in one country, the Bahamas, but it's starting in China, and it's going to happen in other places soon. At least that's what the BIS, the Bank of International Settlement, tells us. And so is that a good idea? Should governments be creating digital currencies? I'm personally not convinced. I've written about it. There are pros and cons, but it certainly represents a kind of devolution of monetary powers to the government. And as far as I can tell, I think it risks enhancing the problem of capital misallocation. And I don't want to get too technical, not get into details. Let's leave that for Q&A. But that's the first problem. Second, there's the problem of the control of money more generally. Is it going to be mostly political, or is it going to be mostly technocratic? Brazil is moving decisively, and in my opinion, doing very well in moving to enforcing or rather increasing the independence of its central bank. And so it's a decisive step in the direction of technocracy. In the US, interestingly, technocracy is being questioned. And so there's a push by many academics to bring back the control of money to the politicians. And that presents pros and cons. It's a hot topic. And lastly, there's a more technical aspect that has to do with the control of monetary elasticity. Should it be limited to the regulated banking system as it is in Brazil? Or rather, should other entities, what's called the shadow banks, be allowed to compete with banks in expanding the money supply, as is the case in the United States, and that's a major risk, because that's where really the system blew up in 2008, the last time there was a major crisis here in the US. So I'm going to stop here and leave some time for Q&A so we can investigate and dig a little more into these questions if there's time. Thank you all very much.